Hello, and welcome to Covert Castaway. I'm Holly.
Je suis Stéphane.
Join us as we share what we learn and how we're making the transition to liveaboard cruising. This coming week, we celebrate International Women's Day, and I just love learning from all the women who sail about their experiences, what draws them to want to live on the ocean, learning to sail, dealing with expectations, and also dealing with small living spaces, and all the advice they give other women considering changing their lifestyle to live aboard a sailboat. In this week's podcast, I have the great pleasure to interview Alex Blue from SV Delos. As it turns out at the moment, we live on opposite sides of Lake Tahoe, and she was so gracious about sharing her experiences with us and what's next for she and Brady as they transition to life on land. If you listen closely, you can hear him making dinner in the background. I hope you enjoy. It's awesome to meet you, and I'm excited to talk to you about everything. First of all, let's start with something important like, do you think the snowstorm will stick and be able to go out tomorrow?
I hope so. I mean, they're calling for a foot, so we're planning on leaving at 6:30 tomorrow, trying to make it to Squaw. It's been so busy up here on the weekends with everyone coming in. So
yeah. Hey, I'm Holly. Nice to meet you. Yeah, we're up next to Heavenly, so we're 4 minutes from the stagecoach lift.
Awesome. And
we're learning how to snowboard, which is really just, premeditated falling. So
yeah, I've snowboarded since I was in high school, but actually have been learning to ski this year just to switch things up. So that's been fun to try something new.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm super excited to talk to you. And what I want to do is a special episode around International Women's Day. So I thought you'd be a great guest. And thanks so much for agreeing to be here.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of me.
So many of us got to see your story sort of unfold on YouTube. And I think what our listeners are really interested in is the initial transition, sort of what triggered you to want to go sailing in the first place, and then what that first year was like and what your experience was. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, what compelled you to reach out to Delos and want to join them. Obviously, you were watching them, but what was the trigger for you?
So I actually wasn't watching them. I didn't even know that Delos existed until a friend of mine sent me one of their episodes. And I had gotten kind of introed to sailing the summer before. I had been living in Colombia for the summer and doing some film projects down there. And that led me to living on a 52-foot catamaran for the summer with 15 to 20 people at a time.
That's a lot of people.
It was... It was wild. So that was what I thought what meant to live on a boat was, you don't shower for months and there's people everywhere and you don't really sleep. Definitely don't have your own cabin. I slept outside every night. But I loved it. I loved waking up and just being able to jump straight into the ocean. So I was pretty much hooked straight from that point. And had it in mind that I wanted to get on another sailboat in some way via my camera, because that's kind of how I navigated my way through life, and had reached out to a couple boats, like dive boats in Thailand and different things like that. And nothing came through. And then one of my sailing friends that I had met in Colombia sent me an episode of Delos and said, "Hey, I think that you're going to like what these guys are doing." So I watched the first couple minutes of, I don't even remember what episode it was. I was like, oh, they're sailing, they're filming it, and they're scuba diving. So those are all my favorite things and what I want to do more of. So I just sent them a random email. Brian happened to read it. And I was very surprised to even get a response. And then within 2 weeks of that initial email, I was in South Africa prepping to cross the Atlantic with them.
That's crazy. So you just dropped everything.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I had been bouncing around for several years and didn't have a home base or anything like that. And I finally found a room to rent in Tahoe, and I was like, maybe I'll stay put for this summer instead of travel. And I, kind of got some things sorted with that. And at the moment that I tried to, settle down a little bit, the universe was like, nope.
Yeah. No, that you definitely didn't settle down. So yeah. So I rewatched today the episode where they called you on FaceTime, and you just looked so giddy. So after that call, were you like, oh shit, like what have I done?
Yeah. Yeah. After that call, I remember going in the house that I had just moved into, and I just sat on the couch for probably 2 or 3 hours. Like, oh my God, is this real? Should I really do this? What does it mean if I go? How do I go? Da, 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 da. And yeah, at the end of it, I was like, there's no choice but to go. I was considering maybe I'll meet them in Brazil or something like that, but it just, it had to be. So pretty much called my mom and told her.
What did she say?
She'd been conditioned a bit because I'd, traveled alone in Nicaragua and Colombia and all these different places. So she'd kind of been getting gradually more and more used to it and more comfortable and trusting me over the years, I guess, to be able to take care of myself. But I remember she said, I got to go, I'll call you right back. And she hung up the phone. And I didn't know it at the time, but she actually went online and Googled Delos. And then once
to make sure they were legit or something.
Yeah. And then once she saw that, I think the New York Times article had just come out about them, and there was, I don't know, a few different markers that in her world showed that they were legitimate. So then she called me back and she's like, "Are you sure?" But yeah, my parents have been entrepreneurs, and they've always supported me kind of.
That's awesome.
Yeah, not going the traditional way, which has been good.
And then what about your friends? I mean, because we got a lot of like, what are you guys doing? Yeah. Why are you doing? Like, they can't even relate, but.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the same with my friends. Like, I had kind of already been doing a similar thing, like traveling. I was sort of all over the place, filming, and I would have, when I would go on trips, my friends would come meet me. And so I don't think any of them were necessarily surprised that I was flying to Africa to sail across the ocean. They were just like, well, sounds like something you would do, even though
good luck with that. Yeah.
What that means.
That's so funny. So had you done any blue water sailing on the boat you were on before?
We had been sailing. I spent the summer sailing back and forth between Cartagena, Colombia. We would pick up 15 to 20 backpackers, sail them to San Blas Islands in Panama, spend about 4 or 5 days kind of island hopping around there, and then drop them off, pick up 15 or 20 more, sell them back to Colombia from Panama, and just kind of doing that over and over again. But I wouldn't say that I learned a ton of sailing. I was actually shooting kind of a reality pilot show of sorts. So I was considered crew on the boat, but I wouldn't have considered myself a sailor by the end of it. We did a lot of motoring and a lot of partying.
Yeah. And some of those passages that you were facing, right, were pretty intense. I mean, from South Africa to St. Helena, and then Ascension Island, and then across, right, to Brazil. So those aren't exactly beginner passages. So was the crew pretty easy on you, or, how did you feel like you were ramping, kind of getting going on those kinds of passages? Those are pretty intense.
I mean, the Southern Atlantic is pretty forgiving, I would say. You're really in the trade winds for most of the time. And I mean, Delos is such a trustworthy and sturdy boat. And obviously the crew, that had been living on her for the last decade knew her very well. So, and at that time, I think I was almost like too naive. There was so many new things going on that I maybe I don't even know if I realized what we were
getting ready to do.
At the time we just, me, Lisa, and Liz just jumped on the boat. We're like, okay, go. And then I'd say I was filming so much too, that I was filming more than I was, learning to sail necessarily. And then, just over the years, it all gradually sank in. And then when we sailed across the North Atlantic, that was a lot gnarlier and much more responsibility on Brady and I's shoulders, for sure.
Yeah. So when did you start to feel really confident as a crew member? That's something that I think a lot of women, either we second guess ourselves or we feel like we have to know everything, or, we just sort of ease into it. It just depends on different people's experience.
Yeah, I think it depends on so many factors. I think the first factor is the people that are around you. Mm-hmm. Are they teaching you? Are they just doing it all themselves? Are you in a space where you can ask questions, which should always be the space? And if it's not, making it clear that if you want to be considered a crew member, you have to learn in some way. But I remember actually when we were done with the crossing to Brazil, we went on some sailing dinghies, and I kind of spent the day putting around in the sailing dinghy, and I learned so much. Obviously, I learned a lot on the crossing, like navigation and how to use radar, and like the list of things is very long. But as far as feel and control goes of a sailboat, I think I learned more sailing that little dinghy around that day than I did across the Atlantic, because I was controlling everything. On a bigger boat, one person's at the helm, one person is on each jib sheet, one person's on the main sheet. And so to feel the way that they all go together takes more time. And so I think just even learning to sail on, a little dinghy sailboat, like a laser or something, is kind of overlooked in how valuable that is, because when you do one thing, you feel how it affects everything else. But it probably wasn't until, maybe the Caribbean, when we finally had a change of crew and new people were coming on the boat. And then I realized that I was explaining everything to them. And I was like, oh, I do know this.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. My husband used to race, and he took a 24-foot boat, a Moore 24, from California to Hawaii. Wow. And I was like, and when we first met and he was telling me that story, I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And then the more I learned about sailing, the more I was like, are you crazy? Like, that's a tiny boat. But he had it when we met, and we'd go sail in San Francisco Bay because we lived over there. And that's a good place to learn because there's a lot of different conditions. And it's true, you just kind of move it one way and it just takes off this way, and you can kind of get a feel. So this first season we spent on our new bigger boat, and it's like I'm completely disoriented. It's a completely different feeling. Like, I understand how it works, but it just, the boat you're on totally, dictates what experience you're having, for sure.
Yeah. And each boat takes a while to learn. I mean, each boat is set up so differently and can be forgiving in certain ways and not so forgiving in another. And it takes putting, miles under the keel to figure out what those things are, for sure.
For sure. So I struggle with anxiety a lot, and it's more just worry, and being in different experiences and not having done anything before. So one of the things I did is I went on 59 North from Key West to Bermuda, which was great. Because my husband didn't go. I was like, you can't go, because every time we sail together, I'm like, I'm the skipper today. And then I end up making like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so you gotta, it's just a habit you kind of go into. And so I was like, I want to know what this is going to be like. I'd never done a passage before, and it was 8 or 9 days. And, there was kind of less anxiety because I knew they do this for a living. But, still the anxiety creeps in, even when you're sitting in an anchorage and it's windy, So I don't know if you dealt with any of that or how you kind of dealt with that. You seem kind of zen anyway, but, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience with anxiety or fear.
Yeah, let's see. So I think that my experience with it, because a lot of people ask me, well, isn't it scary sailing across an ocean? Yeah. And like I said, it depends. There's a lot of factors. And I think the number one factor is like, do you trust your boat?
Yeah.
And that could be as simple as, just knowing your boat's limits also. And then, the crew that you're with. So I think I kind of I got to jump over a lot of anxiety because I was on such a good boat with people who really knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think over time that rubbed off on me, but I will say that, like you said, you say you're going to be skipper for the day, and all of a sudden you're making sandwiches. It's like, I did that same thing a lot where my super comfortable place is behind the camera. Mm-hmm. So instead of pushing myself to learn or to ask questions or to do something hands-on, I would hide behind my camera a little bit because I'm super comfortable there. And if the camera's in my hand, well, I can't really do a whole lot else.
That's your happy place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's also a place that I can hide behind too.
Yeah.
So I didn't even really realize that I was doing it at first, but yeah, at some point I just had to put my camera down and like push myself to ask questions, to not worry about, sounding stupid. And, there's no way around the truth that living on a boat is very difficult. And I know that people have a romanticized version, like, of what it would be like. Like,
oh man, I just drink my lemonade and read
exactly.
Yeah.
And it really, I mean, you have some moments like that, but in my opinion, like, it really couldn't be further from the truth. I always say living on a boat is extreme highs and extreme lows. So I definitely did have anxiety on the boat. I mean, one thing for me too is being around people like that. I'm actually a bit of an introvert, so having to be around people all the time, and people who come from totally different cultures, totally different, family backgrounds, raised in different ways, different values, different things offend different people. And really having to push myself that, like, if someone upsets me, like, that's on me. Like, right. I'm the only person responsible for my emotions, and to not blame anyone else for anything. So I think when it comes to anxiety, just, realizing that you are in control of your emotions, and meditating, taking time for yourself, and doing the research. Anytime that you can do research ahead of time for a passage or a place you're going or anything like that, you're definitely going to be more prepared when the time comes.
Yeah. And one of the things we're sort of still getting used to is, with just two of us on the boat, is learning how to communicate about what we need to do. And, you're shouting over the wind, and there's a lot of the boat right now is in the Mediterranean. So we spent the first season in kind of a hard place, I think, to learn how to maneuver a new boat when you're doing med moorings and things like that. So when you and Brady kind of took the boat over and were doing the season, with yourselves and then other guests, did you have to sort of learn how to communicate together or work together as a team, or were you sort of in the groove already?
I'd say by that point we were in the groove. But I will say that, we started our relationship like living on the sailboat together, which is, I think, a very unique and difficult way to start a relationship. But at the same time, if we can make it through that, like,
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I always joke, our first date was like crossing the ocean together, but it actually really was, we were like living in a cabin together and still not saying like, oh, this is my boyfriend or this is my girlfriend. So it was very, very unique situation. But I mean, I just got lucky. Like, me and Brady work really well together. We balance each other out. We can communicate well. But yeah, in every new situation, you have to learn. So something we've actually been doing a lot lately is he'll say something, I'll hear it, and then I will actually repeat back to him what I heard, what I interpreted or perceived, and it's not what he was trying to say. So just, going above and beyond to like over communicate. And something else we do is we say we have like our departments kind of. So like, things that I am good at and that I like doing, or maybe that I don't hate doing, that's all my department. Right. And then same for him. So it's super easy. Like, something comes up and we're like, oh, that's your department. And it's a way to balance out the workload, because the workload of the boat can be kind of overwhelming at times, for sure. Yeah.
A lot of women talk about that first year, sort of figuring out what their role is, especially, women who I would consider to be very strong and, independent and that sort of thing. And then they're on the boat and they're like, oh, wait, so I guess I'm just doing I'm like scrubbing the bilges and I'm cleaning the shower and I'm doing all these things. Like, let's split this up. But then on the other hand, they don't really want to do the boat mechanics and, the other things. So how did you guys kind of settle on roles, and how was that for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think something that actually is uniquely cool about Delos is that all the cooking and most of the cleaning and stuff is split evenly. So we would have cooking days. So, if there's 6 people on the boat, once every 6th day, it's your cooking day. You cook lunch and dinner. And when you cook, you clean everything. And you make sure that the galley's spotless after and everything's put away. And then the other 5 days, you literally have someone walk up and hand you a bowl. You get to enjoy it. They take it. And then that's it. So I think that schedule worked really well. And then cleaning, they actually had a binder of cleaning duties, and we would just open it up and each person would pick a page and, we would get after it. But yeah, at the same time, everyone does have their different skill sets of things that they're good at, or that they enjoy doing, or maybe that they don't hate doing as much as someone else hates doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, on Delos, it was, I always felt like, even though maybe I didn't know as much about sailing in the beginning or even towards the end, like I'm far from being a mechanic. I could always contribute with like my camera, whether it was video or photo or editing or anything like that. So that helped give me a sense of purpose. But I would just advocate for people to, especially for women, like to not just end up doing the cooking and cleaning, and to make, their case and their argument to be, if you want me to be a competent crew member, you have to teach me.
Yeah.
You have to take the time. Like there has to be times where you let me go do it and you go clean. And even if I mess up, that's still a learning experience.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not like, oh, you messed this up, you don't get to do it again. That's a part of learning. Like mistakes are good,
we're on a catamaran. So my husband's like, you get one engine, I get one engine. And we'll see which one breaks first. So we'll see if that works. Was there anything that you wish you would have known ahead of time? You talked about it being a lot of work. People ask me sort of, and I say it's a lot of work. And I say, I don't mean like a lot of work, like a lot of work. So take the amount of work you think it is and then times it by 100. And that's how much work it is. Yep. But, is there anything else you wish you would have known before you sort of committed, or?
That's a really good question. I've never thought about that before. I think maybe I would have told myself to not work quite as hard. Like just as an entrepreneur, and how I've always been since I was a little kid, I push myself way too hard. Mm-hmm. And it's great. Like there's all these, there's great things that come out of that, but I really have to force myself to like stop and smell the roses sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I probably could have done that a little bit more and taken a little bit of pressure off myself. But other than that, I would say like how naive I was going into it was probably an advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because I feel like, in my career or whatever that I have quit, right? It's sort of how much you put a lot of pressure on yourself to get a lot done. And especially I think in California, you can kind of get in this kind of hamster wheel. Mm-hmm. And I was working a little bit in our first season and then I quit sort of. And I was still kind of having that same mentality on the boat. So I was like, okay, we have to do this. We have to do this. We have to do this. And my husband's French, right? So he's like, we're going to chill and like enjoy, and so we had to kind of find our space, our medium ground where he didn't feel like I was nagging him all the time. And then I didn't feel like we weren't doing anything, Yeah. So it's sort of those first year sort of transitions that you kind of go through. Can you think of anything else like in that transition period that you may have struggled with, or advice for that first year that you'd like to give people? Yeah, I think the 2 pieces of advice would be one thing that I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, but just when it comes to living with people in a small space, just like you can't take anything personally. You have to communicate. You can't let things fester. Yeah. And you really have to take responsibility for not only your own emotions, but your own actions, and not blame other people for things. Yeah. Every day I catch myself blaming people for things just as like a go-to emotion. Yeah. And I really have to catch myself and tell myself that's not okay. Little things like leaving a dish in the sink or anything like that, because that stuff really builds up on a boat when you're in a small space. For sure.
And then the second piece of advice I would give to someone that's going to be embarking on a sailing adventure is to just throw your expectations overboard. Like that idea of,
I've literally heard that from every single person I've talked to.
yeah, whatever you think it's going to be, it's not going to be. For better or worse, whatever you have in your mind is not going to happen. And if you just have low or no expectations, like I'm going to go out, I'm going to learn something, I'm going to fail, I'm going to have some successes, like keep it low and keep it broad, because anything above that is a win. And if you set your expectations too high, then I think that, you'll have some pretty amazing moments and victories pass you by.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great advice. So we talk a lot about transitioning into the sailing lifestyle. You guys have recently transitioned out. Mm-hmm. So, one big question is, like, when you first got back and settled in, maybe for the first week, what was the one thing that you were like, oh my God, yes, I miss this so much?
I would say for me, it would be my friends. Mm-hmm. Like I definitely got really, really close with everyone that I was ever living on the boat with, and grew a very unique bond with them that I've never experienced with anyone else. But at the same time, just having those people around me that knew me for me, like before Delos and everything, right, and really grounded me and like reminded me who I was. I really missed that a lot. So just coming to California and being able to hang out with all my friends felt weird. Like it felt weird to be in a group of people that I knew, like I actually knew. You know, I remember having that moment where I was like, whoa, I'm actually friends with the 5 people standing here. I've known them for years. It's been so long since I've experienced that. So
that's interesting. So I'm curious, just what has it been like, since kind of coming back in and, figuring out where you're going to live and how your life's going to be. And, I think you guys are starting a sailing school on Lake Tahoe, which is super awesome. Yeah. Really exciting. And I want to hear about that. But, how did you kind of go through the transition back? Did you get depressed? Were you elated? Did you miss it? Are you kind of happy to move on? Maybe you can kind of explain your roller coaster of emotions, because I can imagine it would be a lot. Yeah.
Well, I think that for us, we had both been, Brady had been living on Delos for 10 years. Yeah. And I had been bouncing around without any kind of real home or anything like that, traveling for, probably 7 years. So I think that we wouldn't take one moment of that back. Like every part of it was perfect and beautiful and is exactly how it should have been. But I also think that we're coming to a chapter in our life where we wanted some other things, like at least for me, the alluring idea of just going with the wind and having no connections and having, no ties was great. And then I hit a point where I was like, I want a community. Like I want to be around my friends. I don't always want to have to say goodbye to people right after I meet them. And, I want to have a wall that I can paint and like put a picture on and like make my own a home, with a little bit more space and stuff like that. And a dog. I've always had dogs as a kid, and I've held out getting a dog for the last like 10 years, but I love having a dog and riding horses. And so all of the things that like really fill my heart up, that you can't have on the boat, I just like super fulfilled me when we got here. And of course there's parts that I miss. Like scuba diving is definitely the part that I miss the most. Waking up and seeing the sunrise, like there's definitely things that I miss here and there, but it doesn't bring me down or depress me, because I know that those things are coming again in the future. And, to me, the most important part of life is balance. And the scales have kind of been tipped so far one way for so long that it felt nice to kind of like slowly bring them back again. Yeah.
I guess you can scuba dive in Lake Tahoe. You'd freeze your butt off, but
we can, and we will. And we have a trip planned. We have some diving trips planned, but not quite the same.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about, advice you have and on either getting started or thinking about it?
Yeah, I would say I think sailing can be really intimidating because there's like a lot of moving parts, literally a lot of moving parts. And so, and you don't have to, I think some people have this idea like, oh, I have to sell everything and buy a huge boat and sail across an ocean. And doesn't have to be your starting point.
Right.
You can go buy a little, sailing dinghy for a few $100 and sail it around your local lake or your local reservoir or anything like that. And just get going and just kind of familiarize yourself and get comfortable and have that as a starting point. And we did start a sailing school. So if you want to learn how to sail, check out Cruisers Academy and we can help you get started on that path.
That's really cool. So how many boats do you have?
So right now we have 3, about to be 4 in Tahoe. We have a Catalina 22. We're going to get another 22. And then we also have a Catalina 27. And then we have a Catalina 14. So those are that's like our Tahoe fleet, so to speak. And then we are also looking at buying a bigger sailboat in the Bay Area this summer. So we have our eyes on a very specific special boat.
And you're not going to share what that is.
It's hard because we're like 99.9%.
I know you don't know until it's done. Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to like backpedal, but there is a specific boat that is very, very cool. And we're excited to get her a part of the Cruisers Academy and definitely get back on the ocean when, the world
opens up again.
Gets back to normal.
I know our boat came out in February and we were going to go over and start our season in May. And then everything closed up and we had to kind of wait. And so we ended up starting kind of later. But our plan B was to basically rent a boat here on Lake Tahoe and just sail and practice on a small boat, again. And so we were really excited about that. So even just personally, when I heard you were doing that, I'm like, you know what? Tahoe needs more sailboats. There's a lot of motorboats. So it'll be great to see you guys out there. And, we'd love to join you sometime. So hopefully, we'll get you a chance to meet up.
Yeah, it's actually really good sailing out there. It's pretty consistent.
It's kind of like an ocean, right? Like there's big waves.
It can get really gnarly out there for sure, which is also great for learning. And it blew our mind. The sailing school thing kind of I don't want to say it fell into our lap because we had the idea of the Cruiser Academy on our mind beforehand, but we were thinking on the ocean. And then just being in Tahoe, we ended up staying longer because of COVID and everything. Just literally the universe was like, do this. And there's no sailing school in North Lake Tahoe, which is
crazy. Yeah.
Crazy. So we're like, okay, we're going to be the ones.
Awesome. Well, good luck on that. And I'm really excited to be able to meet you guys in person at some point since we're neighbors, but once COVID kind of chills out. And then you're always welcome to come and hang out on our boat, when things open back up and you can teach us how to use our scuba equipment. So
perfect. I love that plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, like, or share with another covert castaway. Fair winds for now.